call taxes to order here, members. And today is March 5th, and we're going to start with the tax committee. Representative Beard is up, and we know we have to finish Representative Clark's bill, but she's not here yet. So we're going to hear Representative Beard's bill first. And Representative Beard, we don't have a quorum yet, so we can't technically move your bill.
All right.
But we will as soon as we can. And welcome, Representative Beard. And I know you have some testifiers joining you, so we're just going to go ahead and start hearing about House File 1012. And again, as soon as we have a quorum, we will actually move the bill. Welcome, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Tax Committee. Thank you for considering our request, House File 1012. Madam Chair, this is an industrial development assistance request, and I have some testifiers with me today to speak a little more expertly to the situation we find ourselves in. Basically, the city of Shakopee has a magnificent industrial park. One of the last large open parcels has been in bankruptcy proceedings and other things for a greater part of the last 15 years or so. We actually have a Minnesota-based company that's interested in acquiring that facility for a brand new facility with new jobs. They're not being transferred from somewhere else. This is actually growing new jobs because of the rapidly expanding energy business in the neighboring state of North Dakota. They make measuring instruments and so on that benefit that industry greatly. And Madam Chair, we are in competition with a factory site in somewhere in northern Mexico, and we're asking for your assistance to help Scott County, greater MSP, and the state of Minnesota as they assist us in putting this program together. So that's what the bill asks for, basically an abatement. Madam Chair, I do have a few testifiers who would like to speak briefly to it. May I first introduce the mayor of our fair city, Mayor Brad Tapke.
Thank you, Representative Beard. Mr. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you, Representative Lincheski and committee, and thank you, Representative Beard, for sponsoring our bill. My name is Brad Tapke. I am the mayor of Shakopee, and I really appreciate you hearing us today and talking about this wonderful project that we've got in store for the city of Shakopee and the state of Minnesota. We have a coalition of great partners we've been working with on this project. We are working together with Scott County, with Shakopee and Burnsville, Egan, Savage school districts, with Greater MSP, with DEED, with the governor's office, and obviously with Emerson Process Management. And Brian Harsted's here. He will explain a little bit about their company in just a minute. What we're talking about today is jobs. We're looking at bringing 500 jobs to the city of Shakopee along with 1,200 indirect jobs as a result of those extremely high-paying engineering and manufacturing jobs that we hope we'll be able to bring to the city. There will be $62 million in wages and over $3 million in state tax revenue generated by the employees as a result of bringing these jobs here. And so the city of Shakopee and the county have both passed tax abatement incentives, as well as other packages. The county has put fiber network together, and we're working really hard to create a comprehensive package to make this work, and we're looking for your support in that as well. Madam Chair, if you don't mind, Brian Harsted from Emerson would like to explain a little about the company as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you say Taki?
Tabkey.
Tabkey.
Yeah,
okay,
it's like
thank
on
you.
A computer keyboard, but without the Y.
Okay, Mayor Tabkey. Okay, great. Mr. Harsted, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Representative and members of the committee. My name is Brian Harsted. I'm the Vice President of Finance for Rosemount's North America operations, and I've been working together with the Mayor and a number of great parties here to put together a package that we think is it's a very unique opportunity. We've seen some very strong growth for our company, which is known locally as Rosemount. We're part of Emerson Process Management, which is a global leader in process and measurement, serving a process industry. And we've seen some very strong growth over the past few years, due mostly to the energy market, and a lot of strong growth right here in North America. And so we're faced with a situation where we need both manufacturing capacity as well as office space for our North America operations. And this facility that we found in Shakopee is a very unique opportunity where it's an existing building. It fits the type of space we're looking for, both manufacturing and office space. And we believe that with our growth projected over the next few years, we are looking to add up to 500 positions over the next few years, and more beyond that, we hope. We believe the building meets our needs for at least the next 10-year period of time. But we do have options that we are considering across North America, and we're trying to put this package together in this project so that economically the two, the options we're looking at are on a little bit level, more level playing field, and then we can make a decision based on, sort of customers and some strategic issues here. So we welcome any questions. I can certainly go through some additional information about the company if you'd like, and I'll just sit back and wait for any other questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harstead. Representative Pepin moves, if that's all right. Representative Pepin, House File 1012, because we now have a quorum. Okay. So that's Representative Pepin's motion to put it before the bill for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. So thank you, and former Senator Roebling, nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Claire Roebling. I am the Communications and Legislative Coordinator for Scott County, and I am here just to express our county officials' desires to let you know of our support for this bill and this project. Already, the Scott County, as the mayor mentioned, has passed an abatement for property taxes. That would be $570,000 over a 9-year period, and we are looking for other incentives to put this package together. And that's why we are here asking you about this sales tax abatement. This is a wonderful opportunity, 500 good-paying jobs. It certainly would be a bonus to our area, our region, and our state. When you think about the income taxes that can be generated from those jobs, the money these folks will spend because they have a job, that they'll buy things and increase our sales tax revenue. And then we also see about $100,000 a year for the fiscal disparities pool, which benefits the region, and an even greater amount for the statewide business property tax. And so there are a lot of good things that can come out of this project, and we're hoping for your support.
Thank you so much, former Senator Roebling. Nice to have you with us today. Representative Beard, did you want to hear from Mr. McKinnon next? I have that name on a list, but not sure if that's what you wanted to do next.
Well, Madam Chair, that is the succinct version, as you asked for. We do have friends from Greater MSP here and from DEED, if you'd like to hear from them. I'm delighted to bring them forward and have them testify about the project and their great involvement since.
Members, do you want to do that, or do you feel you do? Okay, sure. We'll hear from them. Is Representative Clark in the room yet? Okay, she is here now, so we do want to get to her bill, but we were waiting for her. So, Mr. McKinnon, please, welcome. Welcome.
Sorry, Gene Goddard with Greater MSP.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
So this is a project that we've been working with the city of Shakopee and Scott County for quite a while. I think this is a project that's going to be a great benefit to the region, significant investment. This is also a project that's potentially go into a building that's been sitting vacant for 13 years. This building was originally built by ADC, and this is the first real project that we've seen that would bring significant investment and new jobs to the project.
Okay, thank you. Questions, members, for Representative Beard or his testifiers? Yes, please, Representative Myra.
Madam Chair, Representative Beard, this arrangement, has it been done for any other companies recently, and what were the results of those projects?
Representative Beard, you can phone a friend up here if you'd like.
We may be
but Representative Beard.
Madam Chair, because I know the bill we had drafted conforms to language that we've used for other major projects where we've been in competition with other states or other nationalities, or perhaps Mr. Michael can spell it out more correctly.
And I think Representative Myra probably knows that the Burnsville area had something similar. I can't remember that company's name recently. Mr. Michael, can you tell us some of the folks that you can think of who received this exemption in the past?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, that granting, essentially what this bill does is to grant sales tax exemption on building materials and other items that are purchased in connection with either constructing or improving the building. And as Representative Beard and Representative Lincheski both said, this has been done in a number of instances in the past for large projects. I think that the one that the chair is referring to, I believe, was the Goodyear site or something like that in the Bloomington, Burnsville.
Yes.
Goodrich, sorry, got the wrong company. it's also there. The legislature has tried to do this as a more generalized basis. For example, for large data centers, those are the big facilities that have large numbers of computers in them for companies like Yahoo and Google and so forth. So it's both been done on an individual business by business basis, as Representative Beard's bill proposes, and in other circumstances where it's been attempted to be done generally for a class of projects.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Myra, further or no? Okay. Other questions? Well, with that, Representative Beard, I will tell you, folks on this committee know I've never really been a big fan of public subsidies for private corporations. Having said that, this is exactly how it should be done, and I think I'm supportive of this proposal, and I just hope others who have bills for folks think about this. This company is looking for a sales tax exemption for construction materials to go forward with a new project. And I think this is really the model, the way legislators should think about when they come before the tax committee. Some of these other things that attempt to grasp the local property tax base or the county's property tax base or use other mechanisms, I think are much more harmful for all of us here in taxes. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness. I also want to say to the mayor and to others who've worked in the company who's here, working locally to demonstrate local effort and local skin in the game says a lot. I know that we heard the mayor talk about the abatement that his folks are throwing in already. So I think other folks who are listening and care about their provisions should study your bill a little bit. So with that, we're going to lay that over Representative Beard for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill, and thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
and
you.
members. Appreciate it.
Representative Clark. If you want to come to the table, Representative Clark, we were on the testimony in opposition, but our author is here, so we do want her here, and I believe we were with Mr. Bagnoli was up next. But we do want Representative Clark here to be able to hear all the testimony too, and Mr. Bagnoli, please. I think you were next on the list.
Madam Chair, can I just say something?
Did you want to wait till all the testimony in opposition was done?
I'd just like to let...
Sure, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to let the opposition know that we have 2 amendments to this bill.
Okay.
And probably some of their concerns will be taken care of.
Okay.
We're reducing the rate on everything, so we can't have these outrageous claims, and so we'll make sure that
Okay.
we get a chance to do that. If you want me to wait and do that, I can do
Yeah,
that.
let's hang on a minute. Do we have the amendments? Do you have them? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Bagnoli, are you aware of the content of the amendments? I am not, so...
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I have not seen the amendments and was not aware of them.
Okay. I think if Representative Clark, if that's okay, maybe if Mr. Bagnoli and the folks he had queued up last time want to finish. But if it's okay with you, Representative Clark, would it be okay if we just ask Mr. Michael to explain just briefly what they're going to be, so that everyone understands them? And members know, and just for the testifiers and the public who's watching, this committee generally allows authors to add the amendments they want. When the omnibus tax bill is marked up, if we're going to pursue an alcohol tax, and we don't know that, this committee will decide how that would be constructed, but authors generally, we allow them to put the bill in the form they would like it. So we will take Representative Clark's amendments and add them. But just before, as you hear the testimony, she's now indicating that, I did not know this either, that there's going to be some changes to her bill. So if we can just have Mr. Michael, who probably drafted them, or someone on his staff, or maybe it's Mr. Biggerstaff. Please, Mr. Michael.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, what the author's amendment does is to essentially it does a couple things, but one is that it takes the first 2 amendments off and combines them into a second amendment just to reduce the confusion about this. But the substantive things that it does is to reduce the tax on wine, which in the bill, in the previous amendment was proposed to go to 69, to increase to 69 cents a liter, to drop that down to 34 cents a liter, which essentially reduces the amount of the tax increase so that it's essentially a 4-cent a drink increase rather than the 9-cent a drink increase that was before, so that the total tax on wine is approximately a nickel per drink in the sort of the way these things have been talked about. The second thing that it does is it reduces the tax increase on beer with alcohol of 3.2% or less from $13.97 a barrel, which was in the previous author's amendment, to $8.44 a barrel. So what that does is it provides that both types of beer have the same percentage increase. Before, because the dollar increase on both types of beer was constant, there was a much higher percentage increase on 3.2 beer. This reduces the increase on 3.2 beer so that the relative tax rates of both of those commodities would remain at their current proportions. And the other thing that it does, which will have to be done as an oral amendment, is the author added a small winery credit, which in effect exempts those small wineries from taxation, and that the dollar amounts in that were not adjusted for the new lower wine tax rates, so that'll essentially have to be changed as an oral amendment.
Okay, so can
But
we
it's
just...
those two changes in the rate of tax on wine and the rate of tax on 3.2 beer that are the substantive changes in the amendment.
Okay, so can we just pause just a second? Okay, so Mr. Michael, now we all have an amendment that I don't think is the one you were just talking about.
There's the A3 amendment, which I believe Mr. Michael brought down. And then there's the A1 amendment, or 061, which is public defense, Board of Public Defense.
This is a separate amendment.
Okay. Why don't we, Representative Clark, put your amendments on so that we can just talk about the bill and not have to worry about this. And members, again, we allow authors to do this. So Representative Clark, Mr. Michael, do you have the amendment that we need? All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so it looks like the revenue note that we have reflects the amendments. Can we get the old revenue note just as a comparison?
So what's most important to me at this very moment is to be fair. So I will bring people back to the last committee. We had a lot of testimony for the bill, and the people who were against the bill didn't get to speak, really. So we want that to happen here. But what we're trying to do so that for the opponents and people in the audience understand is we're just trying to get the bill in order here. So now Representative Anderson, and I don't know if Ms. Templin has them and can get them to the page to be duplicated, but she's asking for the old revenue estimate and a new revenue estimate. And I don't know if they're both in our packets. Ms. Templin, can you just quickly address that? Thank you. Ms. Templin.
For the record, Cynthia Templin, House Fiscal Staff. The revenue estimate that you have is based on the A1 and the A3, A1 and the A2 amendment, and those are the amendments that were distributed at the last hearing. We do not have a revenue estimate based on the A3 amendment that was distributed today. Unofficially, I can tell you, though, that the estimated revenue for the A3 amendment relative to the existing revenue estimate that you have before you, it raises about $20 million less each year in all funds.
Thank you. Okay, so just for clarification. Okay. Did we add the A1 and A2 last time? Does anyone
Yes,
recall?
we did.
We did. Okay, so we don't have to talk about those anymore. They're on the bill. A3 is going to change those a little bit. Ms. Dalton has gone up to get that member, so we can't take action until it's back. I think the way I understood Ms. Templin say is there's about a $20 million impact in answer to Representative Anderson's question in all the areas, but she, if you heard her, said that's unofficial, because until the Department of Revenue rescores the estimate with the new language, that's not for sure, but it gives us a magnitude amount so that Mr. Bagnoli and others can understand how much now the bill is raising minus the unofficial guess here. And so we will get all that to members when we can. We're going to add Representative Clark's amendments when they're in front of us instead. So with that, Mr. Bagnoli, thank you for your patience. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Joe Bagnoli. I'm with McGranche Law Firm. I'm here representing the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association. It is the state association of bars and liquor stores. I have with me here today Eric Forsberg with the Devil's Advocate Restaurant and Bar in Minneapolis, and Kim Mahoney with the Loon Bar and Restaurant in Minneapolis. After me, we're going to have representatives from the beer wholesalers and Mark Stutrud from President and CEO of Summit Brewery to discuss it. Those are the handful of people we have, and we'll be as quick as possible. I think others may be interested. I want to just talk briefly about taxation. In the last hearing, we've had a lot of stories, but I want to talk about taxation of the product. Alcohol in Minnesota is one of the most uniquely taxed products in the state of Minnesota, and I just want to go through it because it's often unknown, even amongst the advocates. I had a conversation with Mr. Messinger last time, and even he, who's been apparently an advocate for some time on this, didn't fully understand all of the taxes that are imposed on alcohol. Alcohol is one of the few products in the state of Minnesota that has a federal excise tax on it. There are very few products that you can buy that have federal excise taxes. So even before it gets to Minnesota, there's a federal excise tax that's imposed on alcohol. Once it gets to Minnesota, at the retail level, there's an excise tax. There are 3 products in the state of Minnesota, only 3, that pay excise tax. Gasoline, and usually the argument on why we need to raise the gas tax is because it loses ground to inflation over time, which is absolutely accurate. There is no sales tax on gasoline. So gasoline has an excise tax, no sales tax. Cigarettes pay excise, and the sales tax is baked in at the wholesale level. Cigarette, alcohol, and gasoline are the only 3 products. Alcohol then has the 6 and 875% state tax applied to it. But then in addition, and this is what is very unknown to people, because there's only 2 products in the state of Minnesota that pay an additional, we call it the liquor tax, but there's one other product that pays 2.5% more for sales tax on alcohol. There's a gross receipts, which is the equivalent of a sales tax, 2.5% more on alcohol. State tax. The other product is rental cars. So right out of the chute, sales tax from the state of Minnesota is 9.375 on alcohol. No other product in the state like that. In addition, in many cities or many localities around the state, there are local sales tax, often on food and beverage, often specifically on food and beverage. I think you may all be aware of in Minneapolis, and I think some of the gentlemen here will talk about some of the unique taxes in Minneapolis. There are 29 cities ranging from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Cloquet that have unique taxes on food and beverages. So as a consequence of that, in Minnesota, we have some of the highest taxed alcohol in the country. It may not be, and folks tend to say, gee, our excise rate in comparison, if you pick out one of the taxes that alcohol pays and compare it to another state, it may be different, it may be less if you pick out, and I don't even know what the comparison is for wine from us in Iowa, but if you pick out that one tax, you may say, boy, we're less. But if you look at the sum total of taxes that are paid in Minnesota, there isn't a state around us that has a 2.5% additional tax on alcohol. Wisconsin's sales tax is 5%. Ours is 9.375 out of the chute. Just to give you an example, some of our competitors, some of Minneapolis's competitors, New York City, actually isn't in such a different category. Sales tax on alcohol, all in, is 8.875. Minneapolis, with the add-ons, is 16%, over 16%. San Francisco, 8.5%. Los Angeles, 8.75. Miami, 10%. Just to give you an example, Detroit Lakes pays more you pay more in sales tax on alcohol than you do in every one of those cities I just mentioned. So to describe our sales tax or the tax on alcohol as low in Minnesota, as low in Detroit Lakes, Owatonna, more than all of those, Wilmer, more than all of those, is wrong. This is not a small increase. This always gets described by the proponents as 3 cents, 4 cents in the cents. In gross numbers, with the correction you just did, and Representative Clark was kind enough to do the math, it raises $184 million. Currently, all of the alcohol sales tax I described raised $350. Simple math, that is over a 50% increase in the tax on alcohol. Simple math. So to describe it as small as cents here and cents there misses the mark. It may be cents at the excise level, but when that's compounded, that's applied at the wholesale level, with the markups and then the sales tax on top of it, it is more than 3 cents. Finally, I'll just, the comment that gets raised over and over, this hasn't been raised in years. And so therefore, the conclusion is we should raise it. It hasn't been raised in years. It ignores, I would suggest, that this is one of, go back 3 products, the only product that has additional sales tax on top of it, that has it. If this is the logic, there are every single consumer item that we currently pay sales tax hasn't had the sales tax raised since 1858, May 11th, 1858, when we were founded. This product has had the tax on it go up with federal tax increases. The amount of money goes up every year that's raised off of it. It also ignores the federal and local increases. So I would just suggest that currently the amount raised is an incredible amount of money. The amount proposed is not a small increase. It is a massive increase, over 50% increase. So that, I just wanted to lay the groundwork of that, and I'm going to have folks that work in the industry tell you how that would affect them at the ground level in retail stores.
Thank you, Mr. Bagnoli. Is it Mr. Forsberg?
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Eric Forsberg. I am with Devil's Advocate, downtown Minneapolis. I guess I'm here to, as we know, sort of address this idea of raising the tax level, in particular as it relates to beer with us. To give you a little bit of background on my restaurant and what we do, we have 40 craft beers on tap. And part of our business model is we're very beer driven, and I think that everybody here would recognize sort of what is happening nationwide, but particularly in Minnesota with regard to beer and as a beer movement. You know, I don't know if all of you are that familiar with what beer does and what it represents culturally to not only our nation but to our state. The jobs that it has provided in the past, and it is an integral part of our history. It's something that we have lived on and grown up on, and it has been a source of pride for us for centuries. Let's be honest. And what we've seen now, and just speaking from a cultural standpoint, is a movement that is actually really creating jobs in the state, but also creating something that brings a certain amount of life to our state. And we are a little bit behind the times versus some of the other Western states that have been in this movement for a long time. And it is the first time in decades since this movement began that Minnesota has really started to be put on the map. If you look at industry magazines like Draft Magazine, and some of the more industry-related magazines, we're starting to see Minnesota rising to the top rather quickly. Breweries such as Fulton and Surly, and the names that you've become familiar with, even in the last years over things like Summit, have really started to make an impact nationwide. This impacts us not just in the sense of what we're dealing with the tax revenue and the jobs that we increase. It brings people to our state. So when we talk about tourism, when we talk about commerce, when we talk about job creation, everything beyond that, beer is an integral part of that. This is coming it couldn't come at a worse time. Because just as we start to make this movement happen, we're going to slap all these brand new breweries down with a large tax increase, and it's going to become news. It's going to impact, and it's going to represent poorly on our state government and our state's attitude towards alcohol and alcohol sales. Now, what does it do to my restaurant directly? You know, as we talk about some of these tax rates that we have, I guess first of all, let me tell you, I'm not against taxes, and I think no business person is going to be. I think you have to understand that we are very much in favor. We understand that we have to pay for the luxuries that we have. We pay for stadiums. We pay for the things that bring people to the city. It's important. But we can't go forward with blinders. The pressures that we're seeing when it comes to other things that we're proposing these days whether it's increases in property taxes, increases in business-to-business taxes, increases to minimum wage, increases. All of these increases add up. And when you take it to a direct product level, that is an excise tax that I'm going to have to pass on to my customers because I can't hide. This isn't a separate line item. This isn't a sales tax. This is going to be built into the product cost. People are going to see that. And it is going to affect how much they come into our places of work. In the last 4 to 5 years, we've had to cut our staffs down just because of pressures with regard to minimum wage increases. We are coming in with a new health bill, which we are in favor of. You know, we want to provide these benefits to our employees, but we're going to have to actually start cutting more jobs. We're going to make more of an impact on our revenue at the end of the day if we start increasing the taxes on things such as this. Bear in mind, in Minneapolis, we pay more tax in Minneapolis than just the state minimum. We have a transit tax. We have our Hennepin County sales tax. We have our Minneapolis sales tax. These things actually add ours up to just over 13% when it comes to alcohol tax. People don't recognize that. This tax will bring it up even further for us, where I will be, when it comes to a retail level, I'll be raising the price of my lowest beer by about $1.50, if that puts it in perspective for you. And we make this argument a lot. I hear that it's only 2 cents per glass, or it's only 3 cents per glass. And it brings me back to when I'm up far too late and I'm watching television and people are telling me that I can save a child for the price of a cup of coffee a day. And that's fine, and I've done that. However, we're not talking about a cup of coffee a day anymore, because a cup of coffee in this room right now and a cup of coffee with my tax conversation I'm going to have tomorrow, and my cup of coffee with my minimum wage increase, and my cup of coffee with my health bill, well, we're not talking about a cup of coffee anymore. Now we're starting to talk about a vat of coffee, and it's getting to the point where we simply can't afford it. And at the end of the day, the impact to our business, the impact to our communities, the impact to our culture is staggeringly negative. It will be devastating. And I think to the point that when we have blinders on and we're looking at one cup of coffee, I think we need to look at it from a larger standpoint and realize the impact it's going to make statewide and realize that the costs of this far outweigh the benefits.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello. Thanks, Madam Chair. My name is Tim Mahoney, and I own the Loon Cafe in downtown Minneapolis. We've been in operation for about 30 years now. I'm also the president of the Warehouse District Business Association. I sit on the board of the Minneapolis Downtown Council. I also sit on the board of the Downtown Improvement District. When we're talking about taxes, you should know about any club. I mean, the Warehouse District Business Association, I represent music venues, clubs, bars, restaurants, retail, off-sale, Minnesota Twins, Target Field, Target Center. And when you have an entertainment tax that's 16.65%, if you have live music, a DJ, a guy on the corner playing harmonica, a jukebox, that's a tremendous hit for our industry. Now you start talking about this excise tax. Now, before I sat down, I had all these numbers already added up for you guys and everything like that, so I don't know where they would come in with this new percentage and so on. But let me tell you something. For one distributor that I use, Phillips Distributor, liquor distributor, I bought 1,002 cases last year. You multiply that out by bottle, by that excise tax, it comes to $40,000, 64.1. That's what I pay my manager, my general manager. I mean, that is a heck of a hit. Now you start adding on the beer side of this. And the numbers, again, these could be different because of the percentages of changes. But I have 3 distributors that I buy beer from. Each one approximately between $8,000 and $9,000 increase in tax. Again, just easy math, let's just say it rounded up to 10 grand. I mean, we're at $70,000 and I haven't even blinked yet. You start talking about what we've done in the past in downtown Minneapolis, and I speak from where I'm at on the street level. We have the Dome. We have the Convention Center. We have Target Field. We have the new Viking Stadium, which is in some sort of limbo right now because of the way it's structured. Who's going to end up paying for that? There's a 2.5% sales tax that is in the books that we pay, what was set to be put to bed years ago, and it was moved to the convention center. The convention center was the positive generating revenue source for the city of Minneapolis. That 2.5% sales tax goes for bonds. I mean, you guys don't understand how it works. However, that money was flushed into the general fund. And you start looking at this excise tax, and you start looking at the programs that it's supposedly going to help, where's all that money going to go to? You start talking about the money that is involved in our industry and what we do. I'm downtown. I've got a shiny new baseball stadium behind me. I've got the Target. I've got lots. I got the light rail. I'm pretty lucky. But if you're up in Roseville, Minnesota, and you're at the little mom and pop stand, and someone comes in and tells you, we're going to raise your keg prices by $14, my brothers have a small little mom and pop place in a small little town. Unfortunately, it's not in the state, but I go out there and I go, we got to raise the prices by a quarter. We can't raise the prices by a quarter. The people are conscious, they're price conscious these days on everything they do. We haven't recovered from 9/11 in my estimation. We haven't recovered from the .08. We haven't recovered from the smoking ban. All these things, and then you throw on top of it this recession that we've had. People, in my estimation, are beginning to come back out again. They're beginning to spend money. However, you put this excise tax on, what's going to end up happening is, A, I'm going to have to not hire people. B, the people that I do hire, I'm going to have to either give them less hours or not even, let them go because I can't afford it. And I do very well. When you start talking about all this and put it all together, and in downtown Minneapolis and what we do and the economic impact that this could have on everything, I mean the stadiums, the Minneapolis Police Department, all these things that we help develop in a way that we are one big happy family, sort of say, is going to be affected by all this. How can we compete? We can't compete. You want convention business? How is the conventioneer going to come in here and say, hey, listen, we're going to go down, they start going around, what is this? Every week goes by, someone calls me up to a table and says, can you explain my bill to me? And I look at it and I said, well, why is that so much tax here? And I said, well, this is what we have. We got this, 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 and this. Now, with this excise tax, when you start talking about the monies that this is, it'll cripple our industry. Cripple it. And then on top of it, when we're sitting here and you start talking about minimum wage increase and all that to go with it, that's a double whammy. You're going to see the mom and pop places go out of business. You're going to see that little place in Roseville, Minnesota, when you go up there and you walk in, and all these small towns, as you politicians well know, a lot of things go on in those bars and restaurants talking about the good and the bad, what's going on in the state. And the funny thing is, they're pretty good at what they do. They read, they understand. And all of a sudden you're going to walk in there and they're going to say, hey, Joe, how's business? And Joe's going to say, well, this is, business is down. We can't afford it. We have this big excise tax. And Joe can't come in here and pay an extra quarter, a dime. When I get back to that dime, when you start putting all this money together, when I start talking about $40,000, $10,000, $8,000, I haven't even talked about wine. This is just liquor and beer. That's a lot of dimes. That's a lot of 4 cents. That's a lot of everything. 3 years ago when the Target field opened up, we were waiting and waiting patiently to finally make some money because it's been a tough go. We finally got to that point. When it got all over and done with, after all the new taxes and all the things that I had to do, all the unemployment, all the FICA, the MICA, everything for my salaries, on an $800,000 increase, $800,000 to the bottom line, my personal take-home with that was less than 1%. Now, anybody in this room would go to any financial advisor and say, hey, would you make that investment? They'd say, no way. But unfortunately, that's what I do. And I've got moms, single moms. I've got immigrants that are working for me, that are making a wage. They're paying, they're buying houses. They're doing all these things. What are you going to do with them? The strong will survive. The corporate America, the multi-unit places, they're going to survive because they can. But the mom and pop places, they're not going to survive. They're going to go bye-bye. And you guys are the ones that have to go in and say, hey, because people put their kids through college, they raise the family, they're an intricate part of the society, and they're not going to be there anymore. So when you keep adding on and on, it stresses the system. When the system gets as stressed as it is right now, it starts to fall apart. And that's kind of where we're at. So just think about all that. I know it's a bunch to But I'm very passionate, and that's one of the things about this business. Most of us that are single operators like myself, who've been in it a long time, we're passionate. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the business. And if this thing gets legs and keeps going, right after this, I'm heading to Minneapolis right now. I'm going to be sitting down with 60 people in the bar restaurant business. And they're going to ask me about this. And they're going to go back and they're going to tell their employees. And their employees are going to tell their friends. And their friends are going to tell their friends. And then all of a sudden they go into the downtown bar or Little Joe's place up in Roseville, Minnesota, and they're paying $4 or $5 for a bottle of beer. It's going to reflect on somebody. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully we can make this work in some other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. And I believe there was another testifier. Please. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members, Representative Clark. My name is Mike Madigan. I'm representing the Minnesota Beer Wholesalers Association, and I've been asked to testify in opposition to House File 885. MBWA represents beer distributors across the state
Mr. Madigan, can you pull one of those mics, like turn it a little more toward you? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Thank you.
perfect, thanks.
MBWA represents or employs about 6,700 employees across the state of Minnesota. And last week, Madam Chair and committee members, John Cassina from Mankato and Paul Morrissey from Fridley were here to offer their testimony in opposition. And as the chair and committee knows, we weren't able to get everyone's testimony in. And unfortunately, they're out of town today at supplier meetings, but they asked me to testify in opposition to the bill. Beer is one of the most heavily taxed commodities in our economy, as you've heard from other testifiers. Currently, there's an $18 a barrel federal excise tax, a $4.60 barrel state excise tax, 6.5% state sales tax, a 2.5% sales tax or gross receipts tax. There's a legacy 0.375% legacy sales tax on top of that. And as Mr. Bagnoli testified, there are, I believe, 16 local communities that have sales taxes over and above that. For instance, Minneapolis has a 0.5% local sales tax, a 0.25% transit tax, a 3% food and liquor tax, and a 0.15% stadium tax. Currently, considering just the state taxes, Minnesota's taxes on beer are higher than all surrounding states. We're about 80% higher than Wisconsin. We are 33% higher than Iowa. We are 20% higher than South Dakota. And we are 22% higher than North Dakota. House File 885 would quadruple the tax on beer from $4.60 a barrel to $16.17 a barrel. And this increase would obviously dramatically increase the disparity with surrounding states and would have a dramatic and detrimental impact on beer distributor businesses, their employees, their retailers, and their customers. And it would likely precipitate a migration of Minnesota consumers to surrounding states with some alarming implications to our businesses, our jobs, and to perhaps traffic safety. As an example, in 1990, the federal beer excise tax nearly doubled. As a result of that, there was a sales decline that following year of 4.3 million barrels of beer. That was the largest decline in the previous 30 years to that tax increase, and 31,000 Americans lost their jobs as a result of that. Beer taxes are some of the most regressive in our tax code. The 2011 Minnesota Tax Incident Study concluded that alcohol taxes were among the most regressive taxes in our state. A 2003 analysis of the federal beer tax by PricewaterhouseCoopers found that households with the lowest incomes pay an amount of beer tax per thousand of income that is 9 times higher than that paid by households with the highest income. Citizens for Tax Justice estimate in a distributional analysis of the tax system in all 50 states that people whose family incomes are in the bottom 20% pay a tax burden from beer taxes 5 times greater than that experienced by people with family incomes in the top 20%. And simply put, increasing Minnesota's beer taxes would make our tax system more regressive and less unfair, and I believe that's the reason why the governor did not include liquor taxes in his proposal. Finally, a recent study by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and this was just done in the last 2 months, it was a survey, found that on any given day, 82% of men and 89% of women did not drink more than the 2010 dietary guidelines of 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink a day for women. On any given day, only 8% of men and only 3% of women drank heavily, which was defined as 4 drinks or more for men or 3 drinks or more for women. In other words, the average Minnesotan beer consumer consumes responsibly, works hard, and is a person of average means. They do nothing to increase Minnesota's health care costs, and it's unfair and regressive to impose that burden on them. In summary, any beer tax increase would have a very detrimental impact on Minnesota's brewers, distributors, and retailers. The tax increases would cost many Minnesotans their jobs and would impose a further regressive tax on the average Minnesotan. Finally, the tax increase would result in a substantial reduction in municipal revenues in those communities that have municipal liquor stores. For all of these reasons, MBWA asked committee members to oppose this bill, and I thank you for your time and consideration this afternoon.
Thank you for your testimony.
Madam Chair.
Please. Yes, Representative Anderson.
I apologize. I have to go and present a bill, but I did have a question for Mr. Madigan.
After your bill, you come back and we'll get you on, because you'd be 5th on the list.
Okay. Do you think you're going to be going a whole lot longer? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
We have another testifier here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the House Tax Committee, thank you for considering my testimony opposing House File 885. My name is Mark Stetrud, founder and president of Summit Brewing Company. I have a deep respect for the recovery process. As some of you know, I was a chemical dependency professional for 8.5 years before I started the brewery. And the recovering individuals that I have personal relationships readily admit that they do not hold the alcohol industry responsible for their addiction. Excise taxes are not a sin tax. In its purest form, excise taxes are a manufacturing tax levied on a specific industry. How this affects us at Summit Brewing Company is that in 2012, approximately 113,000 barrels were removed for sale, resulting in about 22 million gross sales for the company. Over 1.8 million was deposited to federal and state treasuries. This amount represents 8.6% of our sales, which is a huge contribution that is not recognized. In fact, this contribution is not usually revealed to the public. Therefore, we consider excise taxes as being hidden and regressive. It seems simple to spin the affordability of this bill as a few cents a drink. However, should this bill become law, it would have a devastating effect on Minnesota's emerging brewing industry. Using the same sales figures of 113,000 barrels from Summit Brewing Company in 2012, this bill raises the Minnesota excise tax payments from $519,800 to $1,827,210, almost a fourfold increase. Furthermore, total federal and state excise taxes would be $3,201,210, raising our percent cost of sales from 8.6% to 14.6%. This is not merely pennies per beer for Minnesota breweries. This creates a pause for me to wonder what other industry exists that is subjected to such a level of taxation. Simply put, this proposed excise tax would eliminate our profitability, it outstrips our cash flow, it threatens our future growth and job creation. And as small brewers, we do not benefit the economies of scale that the larger national and international breweries have. To simply say that we can raise our price, frankly, is naive. Our beer is already priced in the upper range. And one must remember that our price is marked up twice before the consumer buys our beer. So as I testify today, I have Summit Brewing Company's 61 full-time, 12 part-time employees, plus 5 budgeted full-time positions for this year, and the $40 million that this company has invested in this Minnesota business by the end of this year. I have this in mind as I ask you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Please. Was there other folks who wanted to testify against the bill? Okay. We do want to get to committee questions, so please, yes. Welcome.
Madam Chairman, committee members, my name is Kim Bredesen. My wife and I are the owners of Carlos Creek Winery in Alexandria, Minnesota. And I would like to ask your consideration to reject this bill. I would be unable to cite facts and figures like some of the other speakers. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not even a finance expert. But I know unfair when I see it. And this is unfair. It's too much of a raise, too fast, too sudden, and you're putting too much weight on this industry. I recognize the need for some monies like this, but to raise this much is outrageous. $35,000 would be the tax implication for our small winery. It's just out of sight.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for your time and your consideration today. I represent not only Carlos Creek Winery, but I also represent the Alexandria Hotel and Hospitality industry, of which I sit on their board, and also the Chamber of Commerce of Alexandria. I spoke to both of those groups this morning about this bill and the impact that it would have on tourism in the state of Minnesota. Last year, we saw around 75,000 visitors to Carlos Creek Winery. Farm wineries throughout the state of Minnesota represent a wonderful opportunity in agro-tourism. They're located in areas that oftentimes economically are disadvantaged and really need jobs and opportunities. This is an industry that is growing by over 10% a year in the state of Minnesota. It is not a time to crush this industry. We just recently came from a trip in New York, and we toured the Seneca Lakes, which is the Finger Lakes area of New York. And it was wonderful to see what the future might hold for us here in Minnesota in terms of being able to provide a destination that people from out of state would come here to enjoy. Now, some tourism numbers that I pulled here. Tourism represents 240,000 jobs in the state of Minnesota. It's an $11.9 billion industry. It currently employs 11% of the total private sector. There are jobs in every county in Minnesota that are tourism related. It represented $769 million in sales tax. 17% of all sales tax revenue in the state comes from tourism. 25% of that sales tax revenue is in food and beverage. I am very concerned about the impact that this bill may have on tourism in the state of Minnesota, as are many of my fellow tourism industries in Douglas County. Every single Saturday, we find ourselves explaining to North Dakota tourists, and we love North Dakota money coming into our winery and into our state, but we have to explain to them after we hand them the sales receipt, oh yeah, that's Minnesota tax. Because they've kind of calculated in their minds how much their purchases are going to total. And they're astounded by what the tax does to their final bill. I ask each of you to think about when you go on a tourism destination, do you go out to eat? Do you enjoy a glass of wine or a glass of beer? And does that impact, if negatively that impacts our ability to be competitive in a tourism environment, we're putting at risk one of our most vital industries in the state. There was also a landmark study that was released by Harvard Medical Institute February 23rd of this year. They actually stopped this trial 5 years earlier than they intended to because the results of this trial were so profound in pointing out the health benefits of a Mediterranean diet on reducing heart disease. every single person involved in the study either had diabetes or had 3 or more heart-related indicators showing that they were at higher propensity to have heart disease. So the people were already of compromised health, and going on a Mediterranean diet reduced their risk of heart disease by something like 50%. One of the things that the Mediterranean diet, that they were allowed to have on this diet, was 7 or more glasses of red wine a week. So we like to think of alcohol as being an evil. It is not an evil. As the gentleman who is here before me stated, most people consume alcohol in moderation. And so I would ask for your consideration to keep that in mind. Also, farm wineries in the state of Minnesota support agriculture. We are the only alcohol producers in the state who must have the majority of our product grown here in the state. We have to use Minnesota grown for Minnesota farm wineries. So you also impact the growing network of growers throughout the state that are just coming now online. You may also be unaware that Fieldstone Winery closed its doors two weeks ago. The economy has been really tough. It's been tough on tourism. Tourism numbers are down. Hotel stays numbers are down. We're just starting to see them grow in a couple of isolated areas in Minnesota. And so in outlying areas, small wineries, as testified before with other liquor stores and bars, this is going to impact them heavily, and they're already struggling. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you both for being here and for coming down from Alexandria. We appreciate it. Was there anyone else who wanted to testify for or against, so we can then get to committee questions? We were trying to balance the time between for and against, and we're about there now. So, please. Go right ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can't get the mic any closer. My name is Keith Smiley. I'm on the Minnesota Grape Grower Association's Legislative Committee. By the way, Madam Chairman and committee, thank you for hearing our opposition to House File number 885. Excuse me. We have had terrific support over the last couple of years from both the House and Senate on advances to our grape and wine industry. We last year were able to hold festivals to introduce a lot of new people to the Minnesota wines. Minnesota wines are a local business, a local product. My wife and I have a small vineyard. We raise 1,200 grapevines. We need customers to sell those grapes to, and we have heard from numerous wineries in the last couple of days that this tax would probably be a hardship for them. They may not be able to survive. I really have other wineries that can probably testify better to the actual expense or the cost that this would impose on them, and I guess I'll just leave my comments at that juncture.
Thank you for being here. Was it Mr. Smiley? Did I get that right? Okay. Yes. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Terry Sovereign, and I'm the Secretary of the Minnesota Grape Growers Association. And I'm just here to represent our Board of Directors and that we oppose this tax because as we watch the growth of this industry, we just think it's an unfair burden on an industry that's just starting to take off. And we're seeking to build alliances with Minnesota Grown to develop programs to help the winery and the food industry partner and become a stronger industry. And it feels unfair that this tax should be coming at this time for an emerging industry.
Thank you for your testimony and for being here today. Others? Is there anyone else? Otherwise, we're going to go to committee questions.
Madam Chair, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ralph Campbell. I'm a volunteer with the 4th Judicial District DWI Court in Hennepin County. I work there as a relapse counselor. Greetings from Judge Holohan and Judge Meyer. I support, not the court, I support this bill primarily because our court has achieved an awful lot of success. We have a lot of supervision. Probation supervises our clients who have 3, 4, 5 DUIs, sometimes more, often at felony level. They visit with the judge every single week during the early part of our program and have consistent judicial contact. Our recidivism rate currently is under 5% and dropping. We're very pleased about our success. When looking at other DWI and drug courts around this country, you can be rest assured our Minnesota courts are really performing very, very well. What we need is a stable funding source, and we see this particular bill as leading us in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson and committee members. My name is Dan Schwartz, co-founder and CEO of Liftbridge Brewery in Stillwater, Minnesota. I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Brewers Association and our member breweries. We're a group of entrepreneurs, part of the burgeoning craft brewing industry here in Minnesota. And the industry has seen significant growth over the last few years, growing from a handful of breweries to now over 30 and several more in planning. I'm here to testify in opposition of House File 885, specifically the increase in alcohol excise tax. We've seen ingredient costs rise, some as high as 20% over last year. This proposed tax would increase our tax burden by over 400%. This kind of increase would certainly be crippling and would crush the growth of this industry. As a percentage of ingredients, under the current excise tax, it's about 7% of the ingredients would be taxed, and under the proposed level, that would grow to about 23%. So as a group of small entrepreneurs, we definitely think big and want to grow our businesses, continue to hire, continue buying equipment, raising property values, and continue thinking big. If you adopt the provisions in House File 885, we feel that the state is potentially telling craft brewers to think small. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for your testimony. Is there anyone else? Anyone else for or against? Last call. We got to get to questions. Welcome, please.
Yes, I am Ray Winter, represent Indian Island Winery down by Janesville, Minnesota. 6 years ago, we made the choice to start a winery. This was the only way to enable my son and daughter to come back to the family farm. We see the minimum wage hike coming here, and we already pay above minimum wage, but it is going to even jack it up more, which is fine. We want everybody to be able to make a living wage, but this is greatly going to hamper us to go ahead and make a living. We have 5 full-time employees and over 20 part-time employees, and adding this on top of all the other taxes that we paid, we are already paying way more sales tax than anybody else in the surrounding area. I think this will be very, very hurtful and harmful to us.
Thank you for your testimony. Was it Mr.
Winter.
Witter? Witter?
Winter.
Winter. Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, my name is John Milner. I'm from Milner Heritage Vineyard and Winery just south of Kimball. And a point that I would like to make is that as of my knowledge, there's 47 small wineries licensed in the state now. Almost all of these wineries have started up within the last 15 years. And I would wager that good 80-85% of these wineries have not even paid back their initial investment yet, let alone made a decent amount of profit. And so if there's any major tax hike on this, on our wine, it's going to severely hamper an industry that's growing. Our industry has been growing about 10% a year for the last 15 years or so. And if we get this kind of tax increase, it's going to severely hamper that. And the question that comes down to me is, why is the state of Minnesota investing in a top-notch grape breeding program at the University of Minnesota on one end, and then stifling it on the other? It just does not make it doesn't make very good sense. Another point, I guess it was a little bit of a question. I got this up from Mark. Is this a small winery credit for 69 cents per liter? Is that in the bill? Is that...
Madam Chair, that was adopted last week.
Yeah, that was
last week? Yep. So that is in there. Then I guess my proposal on that would be that's not limited to 100,000 liters, but I would recommend that change to the amount of the small Minnesota Farm Winery Law, which is, sorry?
Maybe.
No, that's not completely true. The exemption is up for $69,000, producing less than 400,000. But if you produce 100,000 liters, that's going to be $69,000 worth. Correct?
I think you two need to talk offline, because we have people waiting to testify, and we have a lot of committee questions. So if you want to just finish your testimony, and you can always set up a meeting.
I think the level should be increased. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Milner. Further testimony, we really need to wrap it up. And I don't want to take testimony from people who testified last week, okay? We heard from the advocates last week. This week is the opponents, okay?
I would like to just speak what the amendment tax level would mean.
Okay. Well, we're first going to get through the opponents, and then we're going to have committee questions, and if there's time left, because Representative Clark's, and you spoke for her bill last time we met, so please, ma'am, come forward. Are you an opponent?
I'm in support of it, but I wasn't here.
Okay. Okay, well.
I really didn't come to testify.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say that just listening to everyone today, I work with in a chemical dependency treatment center, so I see the 10% of people that do have problems.
Okay.
And they proportionately buy more alcohol. I don't have the statistics than anyone else.
We had that testimony last week.
Right. And what I think is my family buys alcohol. And so to me, a nickel a drink or a dime a drink even, I'm willing to pay that extra to help fund some of the costs.
I'm going to interrupt you. You can tell us your name, because you said you didn't want to testify, but you just did, so tell us your name.
Sorry.
And we're going to ask to move on here, because Representative Clark had the whole committee last time, and this is for the opponents today. So your name is?
Rhonda Smaya.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Members, are there any other opponents? Because we have a lot of members who have questions, and I know Representative Clark wants to speak to her bill. Other opponents? Other opponents? Okay. With that, we're going to start with questions, and first we're going to go to Representative Pamar.
Madam Chair, could we get the amendments on the bill?
Sure, if we've got them here now. Do we have them? Okay. Representative Clark, which amendment you want to move, the A3?
Sure, let's do the A3, and I think...
So I'll move for Representative Clark the A3 amendment. A member should have it in front of them. It's the one that Mr. Michael explained. Mr. Michael, was the oral amendment added to it?
Madam Chair, the oral amendment would be on page 2, line 14, delete 69 and insert 34. Page 2, line 18, delete 69,000 and insert 34,000.
Okay, do members see the oral amendment, lines 2.14 of the A3 amendment, delete 69 and put in 34, 2.18, delete 69,000, put in 34,000. Questions? Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries. The A3 is adopted. Did you have other amendments, Representative Clark?
Madam Chair, there's a A130161.
So I will move the A13-0161 amendment. Representative Clark.
Madam Chair, that adds the Board of Public Defense to the list of judicial and law enforcement agencies that would receive funding.
Okay, so this amendment is another to get it in the shape the author would like it. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Set it for your amendments, and Representative Clark. Okay, so we've got the bill with all the amendments on it, and we can discuss it or ask questions, whatever people want to do now. Representative Pamar.
I don't remember being on the list, Madam Chair, but I just I would have comments, but just because we don't have time, I just want to know what's the next step in this bill, and given the appropriations section, where does all that get filled in, and then what committees does this go to next?
Well, this committee won't leave here, this bill won't leave here, because what Representative Clark did to clarify that is she introduced the same bill, the appropriations part, and I believe it was sent to the starting committee, as I'm not sure, Representative
It went
Clark.
through the Health and Human Services Committee.
So we would only deal with the tax piece.
Very good. I apologize.
Okay. With that, Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to everybody who's testified. It's been very interesting. I actually had wanted to ask, I guess we covered in the last hearing, there's a little conflict here around this question of who's drinking alcohol. Is it, some of the testifiers seem to be saying that this is pretty evenly distributed across the population, and that isn't my understanding. I mean, I understand that a lot of people drink moderately. Certainly, I'm one of those. Probably people would go broke based on my drinking, but it's I know many people drink moderately, but it was my understanding that a very small portion of the population actually drinks quite a bit, and that in Minnesota we have a very high binge drinking rate. So this says that there are people who are really drinking a lot, that certain people are really consuming a lot of the alcohol that is sold in the state. But I really did want to ask some of the opponents of this bill how they think the harm from alcohol should be paid for, because certainly I don't think anybody could deny that although many people drink responsibly and enjoy alcohol, and I'm certainly one of those, that there is a significant amount of harm, and the harm does have to be paid for. So I just wanted to see if anybody would care to jump in on that one. If it isn't by taxes on alcohol, how should we finance treatment and the other kinds of harms that are caused?
Okay, so I think Representative Liebling's asking any of the opponents of the bill if you want to take that one on, and you don't have to. So, Mr. Bagnoli, please. Yeah, sure.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Representative Liebling, I would suggest that currently there's $350 million that are collected every year off of alcohol that the legislature certainly has it within their ability to dedicate to these programs. And so I would suggest we already currently are taxed extremely high and extremely uniquely, partially in response, or I think under the assumption that there is unique issues that arise from alcohol. I would not suggest, and I don't think anybody in the industry would suggest, that there are no social harms that arise as a result of alcohol, just as there are social harms that result from the misuse of other products. So I would suggest that we already have there's a 2.5%, we have an excise tax on alcohol that doesn't exist for other products. We have a 2.5% sales tax on alcohol that doesn't exist for other products. I would suggest that those additional taxes are in response to the concerns you just outlined.
Representative Liebling?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. I don't know what the costing out of this all is, but certainly we know that we can't really compare alcohol to other products. I mean, alcohol is taxed specially because it is a special kind of product, and it has a special kind of history. And I appreciated your explanation, too, of how all of this works. It's something a lot of people don't understand, but I just, well, maybe we could have some costing out. I don't know if Representative Clark has those figures, but how the receipts from taxes really compare with the harm. I suppose it depends on how you measure the harm, because we've got everything from DWIs to all kinds of things that you could trace back to consumption of alcohol. But thank you for your response.
Madam Chair, I would agree with everything you just said.
Okay, so I actually put myself on the list, if that's okay. Did you want to respond?
Well, I just was going to say to Representative Liebling, you're absolutely right that it's only the top 5% of people who drink 11 beers or more a day. I think it was, as was mentioned earlier, probably 80% of Minnesotans, I think it's 84%, have a beer a day or a drink a day. And we're talking about 3.5 cents increase here in this bill, and we're talking for beer, and we're talking now with the changed bill here about 5 cents for a 4 cents increase for wine and 10 cents on hard liquor. And the answer to what the relationship of the income, the revenue from what we get to from alcohol to the costs, it's about 17%. We have a $5 billion cost to the state in all alcohol-related crime, treatment, damage to the society in many ways. We had police officers and others talk about that. So it's really not paying its impact at all. And this is an attempt to try to help with the impact, both of the health impact and the judicial impact. And those numbers will be coming in your committee to actually say which, how much in each portion, because we are working on that to try to get it just right.
Thank you. I just, Representative Clark and Mr. Bagnoli, on behalf of the folks who are against it, I guess, I do want to just comment a few things about the whole thing and for thinking about the tax committee here. I asked Ms. Kunis here to look up a quote from Benjamin Franklin that my husband always says, and gave her a few words to Google, and she found it, and it says, this is Benjamin Franklin, "Beer is living proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy." That's my husband. He drinks a Summit beer every night after work. So, I understand the cultural, historical component, and it's something that's said in my home on a regular basis. But I do want to just, mention that while maybe one side inflates the numbers of the cost of this drug on society and the cost to the government, the other side might underinflate it. And I think those numbers, we are all interested in what they are, but I think it's hard to argue that the true social costs of having alcohol in our society that we can all enjoy and most of us don't get in trouble with, there is a cost that's quite high. And I think people feel that it's not being covered. And so I don't know what the right mix is of all these taxes, but I will tell you just as one member, I was trying to sit here and think it through, and if you added 5 cents a drink, and someone drinks 3 drinks a week, okay, and I wouldn't qualify there. I mean, I don't even come close to drinking 3 drinks a month. But let's say you drink 3 drinks a week. That's 15 cents a week. It's $7.80 a year. $7.80 a year. For someone who drinks 4 drinks a day, and there are certainly people who do that, 7 days a week, that's $72.80 a year. So I just want people to think about that. The question here is that, there's a small group of people drinking a lot every day. And both the advocates and the opponents agree to that it's a small group of people who consume a lot of alcohol. And it really functions like a user tax in that if you drink a lot, then you pay for it. And I guess the question I have, and it is a regressive tax, Mr. Bagnoli, and I understand. I heard the industry. I heard different proprietors. And I think there's some conflation going on with these other taxes with the stadium. And, and I live in Hennepin County, too, and so I pay that transit tax and the stadium tax. I hate us piling on like that's the issue before us, because it's really not. But I will just say that, the problem becomes, so who should pay for that? If it isn't the folks who are drinking 4 drinks a day or 10 drinks a day, who are driving up these costs, the rest of us are all subsidizing that. And the responsible users of alcohol, which is the majority of Minnesotans, we shouldn't be asked to pay those costs, and yet we are, because the tax doesn't raise enough. And I will simultaneously say to Representative Clark, I don't support dedicated taxes. And I have told her this privately and publicly numerous times, and I didn't support the legacy tax. I don't like this, let's raise a tax and then forever dedicate it to blank. Because what we know is when that happens, all you have to do is ask Representative Earhart, dedicated taxes actually end up decreasing funding to that area over time because people feel like they've solved that problem and you never have to raise a tax again on that. So, I do think, there's some extremes here, but I'd love to hear your reactions, Mr. Bagnoli and Representative Clark, because, I can't get my head around why the 85% of Minnesotans who don't get in trouble with the drug, and it is a legal drug. This country has had prohibition. It didn't work. So I think we mostly think we should have a legal drug and it should be regulated. But why should we all pay those additional costs that a very small group of people are costing society? It seems that when you add up, the sheriff and the DWI and the ChemDep and the Health and Human and the physical cost to needing a liver transplant, there's some real costs going on there. And these numbers just don't seem that prohibitive to me to, 15 cents a week, or even if you're drinking 4 drinks a day, it's $72 a year. So, Mr. Bagnoli, I just love to hear your reaction, and then Representative Clark, too. Just big policy questions here, I know, but...
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the committee, a couple of things. First, and I tried to, and I want to reiterate, I have not, and I don't think any member in the industry would ever suggest that there are not social costs with the misuse of alcohol. So I just, if I wasn't clear before, I want to say it one more time. It's the level of the cost, and I think that we would suggest that $5 billion is probably too high, and I candidly don't have the ability to know what the number is. We think that some of that cost is reflected in the legislature's decision to add the 2.5% and the excise tax. Is it the whole number? I'm not sure. As a policy question, though, you picked one product in the state of Minnesota that you are linking the harms associated with the misuse of it and saying, and I mean, this is an issue. We're going to, if you're going to, as a policy, and this you're all here to do, is to say, you know what, we've got 10% of the people that misuse X product. Because of the harm inflicted or the associated cost of that, we are going to tax it. There is a percentage of people that misuse food, that eat badly. I think Representative Liebling would acknowledge, and the governor certainly does, that type 2 diabetes and the onset of obesity in our society and our nation is an enormous health issue, perhaps the biggest health issue. I don't know, I've heard that. That costs society a ton of money. And yet the only product that we're talking about, and I'm not suggesting, I don't want to be in a position to say, gee, you're suggesting other taxes. I'm just saying that for whatever, I'm not. I'm just saying from a policy perspective, I'll use even a more explosive one. There are some people that misuse guns and ammunition that cost society a lot of money. And I'm not, Representative Paymar, I'm not suggesting anything or anybody else here. It's for an illustrative point of view. We're talking about one product that clearly, when people misuse it, creates societal issues. For whatever reason, the only product that we're talking about is today. So as a policy matter, if the legislature decides to go down this path as a user fee, this may not be the last product that you choose. There are other products that I believe that potentially have a greater cost to society when used. Our children don't use alcohol. A couple of the products that I don't think that children, some kids use guns, but childhood obesity is a huge problem that has nothing to do with alcohol. So I would just suggest from a policy perspective, if you're going to go down that path, and I think we already have gone down that path a little bit, but if I mean, there was a couple of the testifiers the other day that where the dependency issue was, I don't even think alcohol, it was chemical dependency, which obviously encompasses alcohol, but it was, I think, not alcohol that was the issue. Certainly there are issues. So I would just, as a policy decision, say, where are you going? Finally, because you brought it up a couple times that you did your math, we would dispute the math that you did there about whether or not, I know it's portrayed as 3 cents a drink.
I did 5, but
5 cents a drink. We believe that when you do 5 cents at excise tax, and we can dispute that, that then let's use a keg of beer at $100. 5 cents on all of the glasses within the keg. I need actually Mr. Stuttrud to help me with the math.
Or
there.
we could use 10. I mean,
whatever the number is, it would add.
I'm looking at
10
here.
cents would add how much to a keg? $30 to a keg of beer.
Okay.
That when you put that on at the excise tax, that's instead of the keg costing $100, it costs $130. Transportation then gets laid on top of that. So then when it gets to the retail, let's say, I'm just making it up, $50 for transportation and markups. Let's call it $75. $70 to make it easy. $200 once it gets to the bar. Then at the bar, you lay on the taxes on top of the $200, not on top. So if it was just 3 cents that you were asking the Tim Mahoney from the Loon at the bar, I don't think, all things being equal, I don't want to speak for them here, if we didn't have property taxes going up, food taxes going up, and all of that going up, 3 cents, you're right, isn't that much. But it's not 3 cents when you lay it all together. That's how you get to a number of 180 million. It's not 3 cents. So I don't know what it is, though. It may be 8 cents, which you say, well, what's another nickel?
Let's say it were 10. I mean, the idea that I was getting at is really the large consumers should be picking up the tab. And we do that with cigarettes, and we do with gasoline, as you noted. You know, the more you drive, the more you pay. You know, and that's not trying to be punitive. It's just a user fee. But I appreciate and I agree with a lot of what you said there. It's Representative Clark.
Worthy of conversation.
Okay, well, so if I can respond a little bit.
Yes, please.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say to all the small wineries that are here and all the small breweries, you are exempt. And I'm sorry you weren't told that by the people who told you to come and testify, because they knew last week that the wineries were exempt. I got a call from a friend who said, do you really mean to do this to the small wine growers? And I said, well, no, not to the small wine growers, not at all. So we put an exemption in, and Mr. Michael helped me do that. And we think that we have exempted, I think probably everybody here today in terms of the wineries that were testifying. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sorry that they didn't know that. This was on the bill last week. That wasn't new today. We just incorporated it into the bill. The small beer producers and breweries, they have always been, have a special exemption, and we have not changed that at all. So there's no change to that. I just want to let people know that. So I am sensitive to that. I like farming, and I think we want to promote Minnesota-grown products and all of that. That's not ever a question, and so that's why we immediately put that amendment on last week. What I'd like to say also is I handed you out a document, and one of the costs of alcohol that we haven't talked very much about is the cost to our youth. You know, alcohol is, some studies have shown that, you know, it starts in youth as a problem of addiction sometimes. And one of the things that I think was Anheuser-Busch people last week claimed that they do a lot of work to discourage responsible youth drinking. You will see an ad that should be in that packet on the front page. I have a couple others. They're in color. These are ads that target young people. And the statistic is that for every one ad that the industry might be trying to do discourage underage drinking, they're doing 87 product promotion ads. It's really not a balance at all. There's a lot of promotion of drinking alcohol for youth that is happening, unfortunately. And we all know that alcohol costs our youth really deeply. It causes them to fail in school. The costs of treatment for them are sometimes borne by their families, or even worse. We know that there's lots of cases of young people who become addicted and go into adulthood, and the relationship of alcohol abuse to violence is incredible. 75% of domestic violence victims, their abuser was under the influence of alcohol at the time of the abuse and other assaults. Abuse of children, a third of child abuse is related to alcohol. I could go through, there are many, many different things. And one of the things our police officer who testified last week about not having enough police resources, this goes to our local and state governments. Our local and state governments would be picking up the cost if we did not have a source of funding. So, Madam Chair, I just want to say one final thing.
We have more questions for you, just so you know. So,
pardon me?
We do have more questions for you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. We're running out of time.
You mentioned that Representative Earhart might suggest that at some point it would be bad to have a dedicated tax. You know, why don't we try it? Let's blink it on for a while and see, and start paying some of the costs and see if we think it's worth it or not, and we could blink it off after a period. I mean, there's ways to handle this if we think that's the problem. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Representative Loeffler, then Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I was really glad to see you clarify the issue for the microbrewers and the small wineries, because it was clear that there was confusion about how that worked. And I know there are some people who have perhaps gone past
Go ahead.
Startup businesses who we give breaks to as they're starting up, who, when they become more successful, would like to always stay in that little category, and people can set that at different points. But the thing that I wanted to also make sure that I understood, and I can't remember what it was, when was the last time we raised the alcohol tax? I think you testified to that in the last hearing. Maybe Mr. Michael could address that.
I believe it was 1987, but
Mr. Michael? Correct? Yes? 1987.
Okay, I could remember it was sometime, Madam Chair, I could remember it was sometime in the 80s. Well, I actually got married in 1987, so I actually kind of remember a little bit about what wine and beer cost back then. And I have to say, you know, maybe it's shame on us that we've let so many years go by in not addressing this issue. But, you know, the prices have gone up dramatically since then, and I think to all of us, it should give us some pause about letting any of our taxes get ignored for so long. I don't think any of us got thank you notes for that, I suspect, but I do think that helps put it in context, because people are looking at a significant increase, but they have to realize that it's been a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question, because the room is going to be occupied by the next group, for Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your patience. You know, I think this is more a little bit of a comment for Representative Clark. I've been receiving countless emails from folks across the state of Minnesota. I've gotten emails from folks that have owned businesses as long as, I think, 96 years, concerned about this with, 16 employees, 47 employees, 18 employees, 106 employees. A lot of these businesses and all across the state, northern, southern, in the metro area, concerned about what this means for jobs. And I think we've heard some great testimony here today, and I'm really concerned. You know, if we're going to start, punishing products for what they may or may not cause a person to do, I think we're going down a very slippery slope, as Mr. Bagnoli highlighted here today. There's lots of things that people do. I'm a consumer of this product, but I don't abuse it. And so you're basically going to be taxing people like me across the state of Minnesota that are drinking responsibly. And this is at rates that are incredible. We are already at $33.12 per barrel, compared to Wisconsin at $18.25 a barrel. And we're going to increase that to $44? I think that is just probably not the right thing to do, given our economy and the pleas that we've heard here today from store owners to restaurant owners and our hospitality industry overall. And I would just strongly encourage you to review this and not move ahead with this piece of legislation, even though I know it's probably a pointless gesture. But I just want to express my concerns, okay?
Madam Chair, if I could respond.
Yeah, I do want to say to members who have to get to other committees quickly, just to remind you guys, the draft minutes from the governor's tax bill proposal, take them and look at them. Ms. Kunish has worked really hard to get the first 104 people on here. So we don't want to approve them. We want you to look at them. If we got someone's name wrong, or you know who they were with because we didn't catch it on the tape, let us know. But this is the first 104 testifiers on this, so take it with you. We'll approve them another time. Representative Clark, closing words.
Joel, just to respond to that comment, I want to say we would be taxing all responsible drinkers, that's right. But your numbers are wrong based on today's, and I don't want to let it stand. We're talking about $8.44 a barrel, not $30 as you had before. And I do want to say that I understand the lobbyists have done a good job of whipping up concern all over the state, and I'm sad that some of it really isn't true. For example, in the assertion about the increase in federal tax that in 1991 that it cost 31,000 jobs, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I had that checked, they're actually, between the time that tax rose and 2000, in the beer industry, employment rose by 8,000 jobs. So that's really incorrect. You can check it out yourself. There's a number of things that have been said incorrectly to inflame people's concerns. And I want to tell you, I'm not against alcohol. I'm not a prohibitionist at all. I am talking about responsible taxation of a product that is costing our communities a lot of money and a lot of grief and pain, and it's not being paid for and has not been paid for. And we need to, unless you have something else that you want to tax, Representative Anderson or anybody else, I think this is a fair way and it's very minimal. So I ask your support.
Thank you. We're going to lay this over for possible
Madam Chair,
inclusion
what about
on
those
this
of us
tax
that were inflamed and didn't get to ask our questions?
We can bring it, we will be discussing this
Okay.
continually throughout the year.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative Zellers. We have to adjourn. The next committee is coming in. We're adjourned. Thanks.